Hey everyone, welcome to a journey through the cosmos of human history. Now, we often think of history as a series of events, but what if I told you there are underlying forces at play, shaping the rise and fall of civilizations? We're about to explore a fascinating concept, how an excess of what we call feminine energy in societies can trigger a backlash, leading to the rise of masculine energy. Think of it like the balance between centralization and decentralization, feminine and masculine traits. Societies, much like celestial bodies, often swing like a pendulum between these forces. Let's look at several historical examples to understand how this shift works and the consequences of an extreme imbalance. Let's journey back to the early 20th century, to the heart of the Russian Revolution. Imagine a society yearning for change, for equality, for a break from the rigid hierarchies of the past. This was the fertile ground where the seeds of communism were sown. Now, in its idealistic form, communism, with its emphasis on collectivism, on shared resources, on nurturing the collective good, resonated with what we might call feminine energy. It was about cooperation, about dismantling traditional power structures, about nurturing the community as a whole. But as with any grand social experiment, reality often clashes with idealism. The push for collectivization, for instance, led to widespread famine and economic turmoil. The utopian vision of a classless society stumbled in the face of human nature, of ambition, and the desire for individual recognition. And here's where the pendulum begins to swing. As chaos and instability gripped the newly formed Soviet Union, a different kind of energy began to assert itself. A more masculine energy, focused on control, on order, on power. The state, facing internal and external threats, felt the need to consolidate its authority, to centralize power. This led to the rise of figures like Joseph Stalin, a man who embodied this masculine energy, ruthless, authoritarian, determined to maintain control at any cost. Think about it. The very men who were initially drawn to the ideals of equality and shared responsibility were now thrust into the role of enforcers, tasked with carrying out the state's increasingly authoritarian demands. They became the instruments of a system that, in its quest for control, had become the very antithesis of the feminine ideals it initially espoused. The Soviet Union, under Stalin's iron grip, became a stark example of how an excess of feminine energy, in its idealistic form, could give rise to a powerful, often brutal, masculine backlash. Now let's shift our gaze eastward to another communist experiment, Mao Zedong's China. The Cultural Revolution, launched in 1966, was a period of intense social upheaval, aimed at purging China of what Mao saw as bourgeois and capitalist elements. And once again, we see the initial embrace of ideals often associated with feminine energy. The emphasis on collectivism, on dismantling traditional hierarchies, on the idea of a society where everyone works together for the common good. These were all very much in line with a certain feminine ethos. But just like in Russia, the attempt to impose these ideals from above, to engineer a social transformation on such a massive scale, had unintended and often disastrous consequences. The Cultural Revolution quickly descended into chaos. Schools were shut down, intellectuals were persecuted, ancient traditions were denounced, and violence became rampant. As the fabric of society unraveled, the pendulum swung, this time with even greater force, towards the masculine. The chaos and uncertainty created a vacuum that was filled by the very forces of control and authority that the revolution had initially sought to dismantle. The People's Liberation Army, the embodiment of masculine energy in this context, stepped in to restore order, often through brutal means. Mao himself, once a champion of the people, became an almost godlike figure, his image plastered everywhere, his word law. The Cultural Revolution, in its tragic arc, shows how the pursuit of utopian ideals, often associated with feminine energy, can, when taken to an extreme and imposed through force, create the very conditions for a masculine backlash, a yearning for order and control, even at the expense of individual liberty. Chapter 3, From Weimar's Ashes, The Rise of Fascism in Germany. Our next stop takes us to post-World War I Germany, a nation reeling from defeat, burdened by crippling reparations and grappling with political and economic turmoil. From the ashes of the Kaiser's empire rose the Weimar Republic, a fragile experiment in democracy. Now, the Weimar Republic, in its embrace of liberal values, in its attempts to rebuild Germany through diplomacy and social reforms, embodied in many ways a more feminine approach to governance. There was a genuine desire for peace, for cooperation, for healing the wounds of war. But this emphasis on reconciliation and rebuilding, on nurturing a more just and equitable society, unfolded against a backdrop of economic hardship and political instability. Hyperinflation crippled the German economy, unemployment soared, and political extremism festered on both the left and the right. This is where the pendulum swings again. The very chaos and uncertainty that the Weimar Republic, with its feminine energy, was trying to address, became the breeding ground for a masculine backlash. Into this void stepped a figure who embodied the very essence of this masculine energy, Adolf Hitler. Hitler and the Nazi Party offered a vision of strength, of order, of a return to a mythical past where Germany was powerful and proud. The Nazis appealed to the anxieties of a nation yearning for stability, for a firm hand at the helm. They tapped into the primal need for order, for a strong leader who could restore Germany to its former glory. The rise of fascism in Germany, with its emphasis on militarism, on authoritarianism, on the subjugation of the individual to the will of the state, was a stark reminder of how the pendulum, when pushed too far in one direction, can swing back with a vengeance. Chapter 4. The Rise of Men's Rights Movements, a Modern Backlash. Now let's bring our exploration closer to home, to the societies we live in today. Over the past few decades, we've witnessed a remarkable and necessary push for gender equality. The feminist movement, in its various waves, has challenged traditional gender roles, fought for equal rights, and empowered women to take their rightful place in all spheres of life. This, too, is a reflection of feminine energy at work. The drive for balance, for fairness, for a society where everyone, regardless of gender, has the opportunity to thrive. But as we've seen throughout history, profound social shifts often trigger counter-reactions. And so it is with the rise of men's rights movements. Now, it's important to acknowledge that the experiences of men and women are not a zero-sum game. Progress for one group doesn't have to come at the expense of the other. However, the way in which some men's rights groups frame their arguments reveals a backlash against what they perceive as an excess of feminine energy in society. They see traditional masculinity under attack, traditional gender roles being eroded, and they feel a sense of loss, of disenfranchisement. This backlash manifests in different ways, from online forums where men vent their frustrations to organized groups advocating for men's rights in legal and social contexts. The key takeaway here is that the pendulum is always swinging. Just as an excess of masculine energy can lead to oppression and injustice, so too can an excess of feminine energy, especially when it's perceived as threatening the established order. The challenge, as always, is finding that elusive balance, that sweet spot where both masculine and feminine energies can coexist and complement each other. Outro: finding balance in a world of swinging pendulums. So, as we've journeyed through these historical examples, from the ashes of revolution to the digital battlegrounds of the 21st century, one thing becomes clear. The pendulum of history is always in motion. When feminine energy pushes too far, triggering chaos or challenging established norms, a masculine backlash often follows. This can manifest as a yearning for strong leadership, for authoritarian structures, for a return to traditional values. But here's the crucial point. Neither extreme is inherently good or bad. Both masculine and feminine energies are essential forces in any society. The key is balance. The challenge for us as we navigate the complexities of the 21st century is to find ways to integrate these energies, to create societies where both men and women can thrive, where cooperation and competition find their rightful place, where strength and compassion are seen as complementary, not contradictory forces. Thanks for joining me on this cosmic exploration of history and human nature. Keep those brains tingling, and I'll see you in the next video.